Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. I am coming to you from Lebanon, Tennessee, and I've wanted to do this vlog for quite some time because I am a big Allman Brothers fan, and especially the brothers, Gregory and Dwayne. And I think there's a big chunk of their story a lot of people don't know. A big part of their story as to what made them who they were, and actually this time in their lives was when Gregory Allman actually ended up with like PTSD that affected him the rest of his life. And I think when I tell you the stories here, you'll be shocked at what happened to these guys and how they eventually became one of the biggest bands in the world, one of the fathers of Southern rock, the men who we know from Whipping Post, Jessica, Blue Sky, Statesboro Blues, One Way Out. They have quite a story, and it starts at Castle Heights Military Academy. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all. It begins right now. Straight ahead in the distance you can see a brick building, and that is the City of Lebanon building now. That was once Castle Heights, and what Gregory Allman said was like a hell on earth. See, the sign now says City of Lebanon Administration Building at Castle Heights. Here we are, Castle Heights, founded in 1902, Castle Heights Military Academy. See, part of the story that a lot of people don't know about the Allman Brothers is that Gregory and Dwayne Allman, and he preferred to be called Gregory, not Greg, even though the record said Greg. His friends and family all called him Gregory. Their father was in World War II, and upon coming back from one of his trips, he was actually at a tavern with his new car and another officer having a drink, and a man at the bar started asking questions about the war and then asked them for a ride home and ended up robbing them and killing them on the way home. Greg actually said he didn't remember anything at all about his father, sadly. The man that killed his father just thought that they had money because they were dressed nice and they were in a brand new car, and his friend actually said, "Hey buddy, we don't mean no harm." And the man that was robbing them said, "Well, now you know my name, so I gotta kill you." And it turned out his name was Buddy Green. So because of that, Gregory and Dwayne's mother, Jerry, never remarried. She only dated one man for the rest of her life after that, and he ended up dying in a car accident, but she was really struggling to get by. And you can see there's several buildings here on the campus from the old military academy, but she was struggling to get by. And so they were living in Nashville, and Grandma Allman was watching the boys most of the time so she could work, so that Jerry could work for Napa. But eventually she decided it was just getting too close for comfort, and instead of sending the boys to an orphanage, she decided to send them here so that she could attend CPA school. Greg said that in those days there was some sort of weird law or rule that you had to live on campus, so she didn't really have a choice. But Greg said he didn't understand that, and when they came here it was awful. He was 8 years old in 3rd grade. Dwayne was 1 grade older. Greg said he fell into major sadness and depression while here. He said he couldn't do anything here without having approval, and that's something that stuck with him the rest of his life. He hated people telling him what to do, hated anyone talking down to him, and for 2 years this was their unfortunate reality. You were not allowed to have hair. You had to have your hair cut all the way down. So Greg said Gregory said that he had light blonde hair, and so when they cut his down, he looked like a deflated basketball, and said he looked horrible. He hated it. So from the time that they left here, for the rest of his life, he didn't really like to cut his hair because it reminded him of being here at Castle Heights. Now, they said your life here consisted of basically waking up to a bugle call at 6 a.m., going out to formation, and then having breakfast. He said they would actually put laxatives in the potatoes so that all the boys would go to the bathroom at the same time. He said after you ate breakfast, all the kids would go down to a little like watering hole that they could smoke cigarettes or do chewing tobacco, believe it or not. And he said they called that the butthole. And I was walking around looking around, and I think I found the butthole, so let's go look at it. When they came here, Grandma Allman did not want them to come here. There was actually a story that had gotten out that one of the cadets here had shot another cadet with his gun, and she was afraid that the boys would become hoodlums if they went to school here. And they shared a room when they were here. Gregory and Dwayne, they said there were 2 to a room, and they were paired up together. They said this place was really for delinquents, kids that got in trouble, kids who had wealthy parents that just didn't want to deal with them or take care of them. Crazy after all these years to see these buildings here and hearing those stories. Also crazy to see as we walk out here. Greg would describe the entire back of this place as being just loaded with thick woods, and now it's houses. But I'm pretty convinced that this area over here, I'm pretty convinced that this section over here was the butthole that he described. Gregory said at the time, he didn't understand that their mom was going to school trying to make a better life for them. He just thought that she hated them and that she abandoned them. So he said every chance he got, like 8 times a day, he would call collect and just give her the business, just try and make her feel bad about the life they were living here, and she would feel bad and try and explain it. But he said that was just the case for 2 years. They had to put up with it and grin and bear it. Kind of sad and interesting to think this could have been their rooms while they were here when they were 8, 9 years old, 10 years old. Crazy. So he said part of the daily routine after you went down to the butthole after breakfast, he said you would have an hour to go back to your room, get showered, do whatever you were gonna do, and then you would go attend 3 classes, then lunch, then another hour to check your mail, then another class, and then you would go out to the field for formation. So formation he described as taking place out here. Said it was right outside the main building, big patch of open grass, and he said you would see children of all ages in wool fatigues or wool military academy suits, carrying 9-pound rifles, being basically trained to become soldiers to fight in a war. He said it was just never their thing. They didn't like any part about this. He said some of the things that you were offered here, he said actually all the instructors here were former military people. He said they used to joke and say they weren't good enough to be in the military, so they sent them to us. They would be trained on how to take apart a bomb, how to put together weaponry, all kinds of stuff. Greg said he got like a marksman's badge while he was here. He enrolled in the music program later on because they got out of here after 2 years. Their mom was finished with school and actually pulled them out of here, which was like a dream come true to them. And she had always loved Daytona from when she was a kid, so she decided to move the boys to Daytona. When they got to Daytona, that's when they started meeting people that play guitar, started learning guitar, got their own guitars. And it was actually Gregory first who started to play and raised the money to go out and buy a $21 guitar. His mom gave him the money for the tax. And then he taught Dwayne when Dwayne's motorcycle broke down. Dwayne really had nothing else going on, and Gregory started teaching him guitar, and then they started both learning and loving guitar through like 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade. And then the summer after their freshman year, well, Gregory's freshman year, his mom said, you guys are out of control. You're not going to school. You're spending all your time playing guitar, so I'm sending you back to Castle Heights. And for Gregory's sophomore year and what should have been Dwayne's junior year, but because of his grades, they actually sent him back here as a sophomore. They both came back here again as sophomores. So during this time, it was different. Dwayne just was very defiant. He didn't want to be here, didn't want to put up with it. And Greg said he was kind of the same, but he said he had music. And so he said if you were playing in a band and played for like any of the proms or the dances or anything like that, you could wear jeans. You didn't have to wear the uniform and stuff. So he formed a band here that was called the Misfits. And Dwayne was in that band. They were both in the band. They would, like I said, he hated being here. Gregory had all kinds of problems, PTSD basically. He just, you know, from being here, hated being alone and just was in hell here. And eventually what happened was he had a girlfriend in Daytona when he came back here, and then his first break he went back to see her and she basically had replaced him, and he fell into pretty big depression and just started focusing on school and everything. And then after a couple of months he said, screw this, all I want to do is music. And one day Dwayne just walked on out of here. He just said he'd had enough and just walked out and went home. And then Gregory got a call here from Dwayne saying, hey, I'm home, the band's gonna practice, get home. So all of a sudden Gregory said, it dawned on me, these people have been ruling us with fear, thinking if we didn't do what they said, something bad was gonna happen. He said we couldn't even sit down, we couldn't go to the bathroom. We had to walk into every room in formation in a straight line and wait for them to tell us when we could sit down. And he said, now, you know, it just dawned on me, Dwayne just walked right out, and I was gonna do the same thing. So he said, I walked into the office of the head guy here and said, I'm out of here. And the guy said, well, if you stay a little bit longer, you can rise in rank and become a captain. He said, with all due respect, sir, a captain of what here? The guy looked at him and said, you're dismissed. Gregory packed his things and left the school, left the military academy once and for all. The beds here were really, really bad. They were like 2-inch mattresses, and since there were 2 to a room, they were bunk beds. So he said you were always kind of like in the valley of fatigue, never really feeling like you got a good night rest. And he said he would wake up thinking that this whole life was a dream, and then he would open his eyes and see the bunk above him and realize that he was really here. He also said the worst part about being here was if you didn't get good enough grades, their punishment was pretty brutal. They would call you in, tell you to bend over and grab the table, and then they would either beat you with a canoeing paddle with holes drilled into it, or with a straightened out wire coat hanger. He said he could remember getting whipped from, they would start at the back of your knees and work their way all the way up your back. He said he could remember hearing boys scream, and pretty intense, brutal punishment, but I guess for the day, it's, you know, military academy and everything. So they would also take the leather straps off the rifles and whip you with those as well. This is also the place that Dwayne developed a love of reading, though. That was one of the plus sides, was that Dwayne loved to read Tolkien and developed that love here. And also Gregory said because he was so depressed being here, he really fell into his studies, and there for a short time he wanted to be a dentist, he thought. But he said as soon as they left here, they would fall back into being regular public school students without the drive that they had here. There's a part of me that just thinks this place is so freaking haunted. It just has to be. And there's a part of me that really wants to go in and just kind of like look around, but being such a fan, it almost gives me the heebie-jeebies hearing Greg talk about it in his book, My Cross to Bear. Here's the front. I want to at least see what it looks like now, but let's see this staircase and everything. Think how many cadets would have came down that staircase for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So one of the things that this place also triggered, and a lot of people may not agree with, but because of being here, both guys did not want to go to Vietnam. They were insistent upon being draft dodgers. And I know a lot of people hate that about Muhammad Ali, even though I think Muhammad Ali had very good reasons. If you get into, you know, the way he was treated when he came back as an Olympian, and the way his father, who was a veteran, was treated when he came back. He didn't want to fight for a cause he didn't believe in. Well, the boys, they both, having been here, were so tired of being told what to do and being bossed around. They just hated that kind of oversight, having someone telling them what they were going to do, especially when, as they said, they wanted to play music and they didn't want to go die for a cause they didn't believe in. So the ways that they ended up avoiding the draft were that when Dwayne was called, Dwayne decided to put on women's panties and go into the inspection. They basically would call you in and put you through like a physical and all that stuff. He basically was hoping that they would think, as he quote unquote would think he was a sissy, and then not sign him up. But Gregory said he took him there, and what happened was they saw that and they just literally tore the panties off of Dwayne, said put your jeans back on, you're fine. And when they took him in to put his hand up for the oath, he refused to put his hand up. He put his hands in his pockets, and every time they said take your hands out of your pockets, he said no. They finally said, you know what, you're going to Leavenworth, you're gonna be busting rocks in Leavenworth, go home, the sheriff will come pick you up later. And so he was terrified. He went home, and Gregory made a joke saying, you know, with your luck, they'll probably lose your draft card. And that's exactly what happened. They never came, picked him up, never contacted him again. And as Gregory said, for all intents and purposes, Dwayne Allman was completely vanished from any kind of military service and from the records of the military. But what Greg did was, a year later when it was Greg's turn, he just said he was going to shoot a hole in his foot and go in there, and that's basically what he did. He looked up the bone fragments of the foot and eventually went and shot his foot, and then went to the hospital, had a doctor write up a note, and then when it was his turn to go in, he went in with his feet all bandaged up and everything. And he said the guy he said barely even looked up and just said, what's wrong with your foot? And he said, oh, I was cleaning my favorite handgun and accidentally went off and put a hole in my foot. He said, okay, you're free to go. We can't use you. And so that's how they both got out and ended up forming the Allman Joys, which turned into the Hourglass, which then turned into the Allman Brothers Band. Isn't that kind of crazy to see? You got a cannon, football goal post over there. And this was the library, which is now the Military Academy Museum, which would be really cool to check out, because I noticed inside they had some pictures, but nothing mentioning the Allman Brothers, probably because they didn't say anything flattering about the place really, other than they enjoyed reading here. But yeah, I'd love to see if they have anything about them inside here, but it's closed. All right, my friends, if you're an Allman Brothers Band fan, or if you didn't know any of these stories, I hope this was interesting to you. It was fascinating to me. I've never been here, and I've wanted to see this for a while, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching. Rest in peace, Dwayne Allman, Gregory Allman, everybody in the Allman Brothers Band except for J-Mo, who's still alive. And we will see you next time. Thank you, and have a great night. Goodbye.